Hello there, you join me back again in the cabin. Here I am. Why am I doing this now when you're used to seeing me on screen delivering my talks as they are presented on the Sunday at church? Well, the reason for this is because simply I preached away at a church that I was very kindly invited to come back to for my third time. Always a good sign when you're asked to come back. And I was given this passage in James where it's talking about two kinds of wisdom. And I thought, because it wasn't recorded on the day, I figured it would be a really good idea to recreate it for the channel so it doesn't get lost in the space of time. And I thought, I've got a bit of time this morning, so here I am. I'm going to give this message to you, and I hope it's a help to you. I hope it's some sort of use, because wisdom is something we sorely need, isn't it, in this day and age. If you look behind me, you'll see that I've been doing some work on my gadgets and things. I hope that's not a distraction for you. It's work in progress, so it's not, I don't need to reassure you of this, but it's kind of stuff that I'm trying to get sorted. But I thought it might be the elephant in the room. Think, oh, what's he got going on in the back there? But yeah, here we go. So this is from James chapter 3, and it's verses 13 to 18. So I'll just read this to you. James 3, 13 to 18. So who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So I hope I can deliver this message without the distraction of, it's raining outside at the moment, it's quite heavy, and if it gets any louder it will be rather deafening, kind of like being in a shed. I don't see this as a shed, it's a cabin to me, but there we go. But it is also rather cold, and so I'm going to need to have my hat on for this. But we're going to look through this passage, and earlier on in this chapter, I didn't get to cover this on the day, but it talks about taming the tongue. And this is one of those passages that makes people feel really uncomfortable, because it's, we can all relate to having said things we wish we hadn't. Saying stuff that hurts people when we're in our feelings of anger, and we can get so sort of caught up in our emotion that we just spout stuff that actually we would never have said if we weren't feeling that way. And James addresses this. And one of the things about James is he really cuts to the chase. He doesn't pull his punches, and he has some very cutting things to say. So is he the one to be talking about this? I don't know, but I think everything he says is, I believe, divinely inspired. This comes not just from him, it comes from God. In fact, it's God's message through him. And that's what some of the things that I try to think of when I'm giving a message, that when I'm preparing a talk, I ask for God to speak through me, so that it's not about my own agenda, not about my selfish ambition. I want it to be what God is saying, not what I am saying. And I've often felt that it's important for me to learn, just as much as those who come on a Sunday to hear the message, that I've got plenty of work that needs doing in my life, and my character, my flaws, my shortcomings, all those things. So taming the tongue, yeah, that's an area that I need to work on too. James likes to be very sort of clear, but he's also very human. So he will address the people he's writing to and acknowledge things. And where he's talking about wisdom, he will talk about how we all stumble in many ways. as it says at the beginning of the chapter in verse 2, "For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body." So he's kind of saying, if you can sort this out, then you're perfect. And you don't get to be perfect in this life. You have to be in the next one to reach that perfection. And so he's including himself in that. So as we come to wisdom, who has wisdom these days? Who has the information that they need, that they impart to others, that is just like the source of life? It's really encouraging. And we can all think of somebody that we've spoken to that said something to us that has really resonated and really helped us in our journey. 2 days ago, I was looking at a shopping channel. I'd been gifted some money, a small amount of money, that I thought, I don't actually like treating myself, because what do I have that what do I not have that I need? And I have everything I need. But this was gifted to me as you need to do with it as you want. It's something for you as a way of saying thank you. And it was a very small amount, but I chose to look for a board game that I hadn't found before or tried before, and I found one. But in my scrolling, the endless scrolling that we do in our culture nowadays, I came across this. It was sold as a board game, but it was basically tarot cards that weren't tarot cards. They were words of Jesus, and all the cards had pictures and images of the rather Western view of Jesus as we have him, sort of a white person in a nightie and a long beard, and not looking very Jewish. But these cards were sold as tarot cards with encouraging words of Jesus, and I thought, that's a really strange connection of two worlds coming together. Now, I see tarot as something which is forbidden by God, because it's about getting a message from the other side or some sort of mystical source. And maybe fortune telling is in there as well, something that's going to happen. You can be warned about it if you read the cards. God forbids that. He doesn't allow us to do that. And it's because the future terrifies us. He doesn't want us to live in fear. Imagine if you were told that you're going to get deathly ill next month. That will change the whole way, course of your thinking. You'll be racked with fear. You'd be doing things you wouldn't normally do. And it's not for us to know the future. So when I saw this merged with Jesus, I wondered, who would do this? Who would create this? So I did a bit of research, and I found out that it's a lady called Doreen Virtue. I don't know if that's her real name. It doesn't really matter, I guess. But this lady, Doreen Virtue, she has a ministry that where she came to know the Lord for herself. And she used to be, in her former life, before she came to know the Lord, she was one of the high-ranking New Agers. She wrote countless self-help books, and she did big tours around the world, and she lived quite a high-flying life. Had her rather posh house in Hawaii, and but she always felt this intense sadness or loss, or just not a completeness. The happiness wasn't there that she was telling others to find. And she grew up with hearing about Jesus, but it was a rather doctored, twisted, distorted view of Jesus and his teachings. They left out the really crucial stuff like his death and his resurrection. But she was always drawn to hearing about him. And one day she describes, because I found this on her website, she was driving home listening to a sermon by Alistair Begg. Now, Alistair Begg is a really great evangelist. He's a great speaker, and I had the privilege of hearing many of his sermons in person at the Keswick Convention in the Lake District. So I knew that this guy is somebody who does know the Lord, and because of, as far as God knows, of course, but from his teaching and the things he stands for, he is wholly in with the Bible. He doesn't hold back on some of the really culturally sensitive things as well. So when I heard that she was listening to him, I thought, okay, that's going somewhere then. And she heard him talking about passages in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy, where God is saying, these are the things which I find detestable and an abomination, and they're vile, and you should have no part in them. And it was listing all the things she was doing. So she suddenly felt that she wasn't close with God. She was actually hurting God and displeasing him. So she went home and she gave her life to the Lord. And since then, she has been campaigning fervently to tell people not to read her books, because her books have got worldly wisdom in them. But she says, of course, that it took a while for all the New Age stuff, all the baggage of New Age, to leave her life. So she was still doing some of it while she was a Christian, and the Lord was gradually chipping away all of these dark areas. So probably this tarot card box then came out of that. Why am I talking about that? Well, I think it really does encapsulate worldly wisdom with godly wisdom. We have this idea of what wisdom is, and we can hear these wise sages and all their years of experience and the things they've learnt. And when we listen, we can get this nice, warm, cosy feeling. Oh, and that's a really good thing to hear. You know, like, for example, failure isn't falling down, failure is staying down. You know, that gives us a sense of hope, doesn't it? Oh, I'm not a failure because I keep getting up, and I need to keep getting up. So we get this nice sort of affirmation through listening to wisdom. But all of it's worthless if we don't actually put it into practice. It just becomes head knowledge. It just becomes stuff that we know. Wisdom is useless if we don't live it. And James is talking about this because he wants people to get wisdom. He wants them to understand, not to look at the world, not to see the answers in the world, because there was a lot of paganism going on at that time. There was a lot of worshipping other gods. And they were thinking that this is stuff that we need to incorporate into our living. But he was saying, no, you need to move away from that. So who was he talking to? Well, the Greek word for wise is sophos, which means teacher. And right at the beginning of that chapter, he's talking to teachers, because he starts by saying, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Now, just saying those words gives me a real sense of trepidation, because I am a teacher in what I do at church. I'm probably considered a teacher by the people that I serve in the place I work, when I'm serving people with addiction, drug addiction and alcoholism. They look to me as somebody who's providing information, which is what a teacher does. So I guess those who are listening and reading this are thinking, well, I'm okay then, because I'm not a teacher. I'm just an average Christian. I just do what I do for God, and I'm not standing up the front with a group of people listening to me. But think about this. If you are in a position where somebody asks you, what is the source of your belief? You know, what is it to be a Christian? They're asking you and inviting you to provide information about your beliefs. What is it you stand for? Who is it you stand for? And that means that you are teaching them. You may not realize it at the time, but you're giving information and they are receiving it. And of course they can take or leave that, but that's just the same anywhere, isn't it? Anywhere we go, we're being taught, we can take or leave it. So I believe that this does have a wider view, that it can incorporate everybody, because we're all told and called by God to give an account for the hope we profess. So James validates what it means for a person to have godly wisdom, and it comes down in verse 13 to humility, doesn't it? Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. So this is the ESV version that I really hold to. I prefer the ESV over all the other versions of the Bible. But it says about meekness, and another term for meekness is humility. We need to be humble. Have you ever met somebody who's full of themselves and giving wisdom? That's the sort of person we tend to steer away from, or generally, isn't it? Unless we have them up on a pedestal and we idolize them, we overlook all the kind of self-promotion. But generally, if we're looking for wisdom, we're more likely to accept it from somebody who is a servant to others, who puts others before themselves, especially for us Christians. And I think it's really important for us to know, how do we gain godly wisdom? How do we know how to be wise in God's eyes, so that we know how to avoid all the world's trappings? And if we were to use a term or a method that's called Socratic questioning, I'm aware of the irony in that, because Socrates was not a person who was a follower of God. He predates Jesus, and he points to self and says, you have the answers to your own questions. But a method that he devised is about digging deeper. So you have a premise, and then you don't just take it at face value, you look under the surface of that, what led to this, and then you take it deeper than that, what led to that to lead to this. So it's called Socratic questioning because you dig deeper, you go further down, and you trace it down to its source. And we can do that when we're feeling anxious, can't we? Or feeling worried. Okay, I'm feeling worried and anxious. What has triggered this? What's underneath that? And it may be some event that's coming up that you're worried about, and you're thinking, okay, so why would I worry about that? So you take it further down. And when we're looking at wisdom and how we can gain godly wisdom, in order to know what is wise in God's eyes, we need to learn it. We need to study the Bible. We need to look at what's in the passages of the Bible, because this is where we learn about what pleases God, and who God is, and what he stands for, and what he wants for us. We're not going to know how to please God if we don't study the Bible. It's not just also about head knowledge, so we take it a deeper layer. It's about applying it as well. So we need to learn about it, we need to apply it, we need to live it out. It's about the application of what we learned. And what that comes down to is humility, sacrifice, and love. These are the three things which really help us to feel a connection and a closeness with God. It's backed up in 1 Corinthians, isn't it? 1 Corinthians 13, 1 to 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. So it's all for nothing if we don't have love. And that starts with the love of God. We need to love God, so then we can love each other. We can love our enemies. It's the power of that God gives us when we love him. One of my favourite pearls of wisdom is people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So in order for people to actually take notice of us, they have to see that we care about them. They need to see that we actually do love them. So there are many sources of wisdom in our world, aren't there? The best way to test them is, who are they pointing to? Now, I don't know if you've read a self-help book. There are so many of them that it's big business, isn't it? People just love to be fed this answer that you can solve all your problems. People like to be wrapped up in a blanket and told nice things. And I think there are many sermons that you hear in some churches that have been guilty of that. You know, preaching God's love, and God accepts you. He takes you as you are. But they miss out and overlook all the stuff about how we've got work to do on ourselves. We need to get rid of all the actual moral filth and all the shortcomings and things. So people don't want to hear about sin. They don't want to hear about that. They want to be hearing more. Tell us more about how God loves me. But here's the thing. God loves us so much that he refuses to leave us that way. Why would God love us and yet allow us to keep hurting ourselves? He doesn't want that for us. And James points out that bitter envy, selfish ambition, these are ugly things, but they're actually demonic as well. He again, as I said, he doesn't pull his punches. It comes from the enemy. It comes directly from hell. We need to move away from it. To not be self-seeking, as in a way that promotes ourselves and makes us up on a higher level than others. And we see a lot of this around us, don't we? Ego stroking. And it's really sad, because actually people just get more and more empty the more that they try to define who they are, the more that they try to elevate themselves. And they try to do it with money, sex and power. And these are the things which are in themselves not wrong to strive for, if we go about them the way God intended. But because if you don't have God, these things actually corrupt you in the end. They seem like worldly wisdom because these are the main driving forces of human nature. But ultimately, if there's no God for you, then where do you go when you've got those things? You have to keep getting more of them. And those things will corrupt you. They will taint you. And they will turn you into somebody that you never would have liked in somebody else. So James gives us a list in verse 17 of the kind of wisdom that we should be looking for and offering. And it's first of all pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, impartial, sincere. So worldly wisdom will tell us to look in. Godly wisdom tells us to look out. Because if you think about the list that I just gave you there, they're all about looking outwards, being a servant to each other. And the one that really stings when we think about it is impartial. We have to be impartial in giving wisdom and helping people. Now that means being impartial to those that have hurt you, impartial to those who want to see harm come to you, your enemies, to put a finer point on it. And God wants us to love our enemies, so we must be impartial. We must not only help those who help us, we must not only help those who have been kind and nice to us and helped us out of a difficult time. We must also be ready to support and help those who actually don't like us at all. Sometimes it's not that they've done something to you. Sometimes it's not that they have been your enemy. There are people out there that we just don't get on with. Just a clash of personalities. And there's no particular one thing that you can define as to why you don't like them. It's just there's something that grates between you. And that's human nature. That's not necessarily that they're your enemy. It's just that you need to pray for that. Pray for that person. Pray for your heart to change. Because we need each other. We need each other in this life. So God's ultimate goal in this message is to guide us towards true intimacy with him and to have true wisdom, because there are so many things in this life that will trip us up and ensnare us. I've got things in my life that I'm still working on, and it's not easy. It really isn't. But God's not going to give up on us, and he wants us to trust him. He wants to give us true guidance and harmony. And we need to be ready to be harmonious to others. And I want to close with this story that I shared on that morning that I was at this church. And because when we know what God wants from us, and when we feel we know what pleases him, then that can give us a real self-righteousness, can't it? We may feel we're being righteous for God, but actually it's about us getting other people to obey him, when actually all we need to do is guide them and encourage them to obey him. Now, there was this story about this young chap who was courting the daughter of this pastor, and he took her on the first date to the cinema. They watched a film, they came home, and then there was this meal around the table, this family meal. So this guy was spoken to by the father of this girl, and he said, "I understand you took my daughter to the cinema." And he said, "Well, yeah, it was nice, yeah." And he said, "You took my daughter to the cinema?" And he said, "Yes, yeah, I did, yeah." And then the father said, "What would you have done if the Lord had returned while you were there?" So he replied, "I don't know, missed the end of the film, maybe." And I don't know how it went from there, but probably not very well. And we need to be loving. That's kind of the point of that story, isn't it? That we can have very dogmatic views on how to please God. We may see it as wisdom, but are we loving when we give that wisdom? Are we loving in our delivery, in what we want for that person? Or are we just trying to tell them off because God tells us it's wrong? So I'm going to leave that with you. And if you have engaged with this, well done. This is a one-off video. I'm not going to be doing this a lot. We're going to be going back to the usual format. But I did want to just recreate this for you because it's a really good message. And I am with you in the congregation listening to these words, because I've got to live this too. So I'm hoping to see you again soon. Bye for now.